In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on February 26, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start. If you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Michigan State versus Purdue. Under the lights at Mackey, this matchup feels like one that should tilt toward the home crowd at first glance. The big brand, the lofty ranking, the whole aura that comes with it. Look a little closer though, and the gap between these two is much thinner than the nameplates suggest. Both programs walk into this one with very similar resumes, strong overall records, strong league marks, and the kind of consistency that makes coaches sleep a little easier and bettors a little more nervous. The difference is that one side is still being priced off preseason hype and brand power, while the other is carrying a bit of quiet value simply because it does not have the same glow around its logo. Michigan State leans on a defense that has been one of the better scoring units in the country, holding opponents in the mid-60s on average, while Purdue lives more on the strength of its firepower and accepts a bit more wobble on the defensive end. You could see that crack when Michigan walked into this same building recently and put up a number in the 90s, turning Mackey from a fortress into a reminder that even elite offenses can get dragged into shootouts if they are not locked in. That kind of night does not mean Purdue suddenly forgot how to guard, but it does show that a disciplined, prepared visitor can get comfortable and stay comfortable on this floor. On the other side, Michigan State is coming off a grind of a win over Ohio State, one of those games that leaves everyone annoyed despite the result. The coach was not exactly handing out gold stars afterward, and when that happens in late February, it usually leads to a week of sharp practices, film sessions that cut a little deeper, and a group that shows up with something to prove. Honestly, that emotional push matters almost as much as raw numbers in spots like this, because you are not just measuring talent, you are measuring how a veteran team responds when it gets called out in front of the room. From a market angle, Purdue has been more or less neutral against the number this season, winning plenty but not exactly printing tickets. Michigan State has been modestly more reliable in that regard, and what really stands out is how rarely the Spartans even get slotted in the underdog role. When a team that is usually laying points suddenly gets a decent handful to work with, it tells you the market is still leaning hard into the shine of the favorite. Add in the fact that this is not some wide-eyed group walking into Mackey for the first time. They already handled Purdue last season and know the vibe, the noise, and the pressure, and you get a profile that fits the classic seasoned road dog. Injury-wise, Michigan State has some longer-term depth concerns in the front court, but the main rotation pieces for both squads are expected to be available, which turns this into a true strength versus strength matchup rather than a who is missing story. Here is the thing, when talent, experience, and current form sit this close, and one side is still boosted by preseason reputation, the edge very quietly tilts toward the group that gets to play with a little chip and a little cushion from the number. As our first pick for this matchup, the Michigan State Spartans to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Purdue has lived as one of the most productive offenses in the country, piling up points with efficient half-court sets, good spacing, and very few wasted trips. Michigan State is not far behind, bringing its own steady scoring punch, and together their season averages add up to a combined profile that sits well above the kind of number usually attached to a bruising conference game. Both teams share a couple of important traits on offense. They move the ball, they rack up assists, and they protect it. Clean possessions, good shot quality, and limited turnovers usually mean fewer empty trips and more actual scoring chances, which is exactly what you want if you are leaning toward a higher final tally. It is the opposite of those rock fights where every other possession ends with a wild heave at the buzzer. There is also recent proof from this same floor that things can get wild when the pace picks up even a little. Michigan just came in here and combined with Purdue for a total that shot well past what you would expect from a so-called defensive league, and that was not some double overtime circus. It was two capable offenses finding rhythm and refusing to let go of it. That does not guarantee a repeat, of course, but it does show that the building itself is not some automatic lid on the rim. Season-long trends line up with that view. Purdue games have crossed this general scoring range plenty of times, and Michigan State contests have followed suit often enough that it no longer feels like a fluke. When both teams have a history of surpassing similar totals, it stops being a coincidence and starts looking like part of their identity. They are comfortable in games where both sides reach the 70s and keep pushing. If this matchup stays close, and it has every reason to, the final few minutes can become their own little game inside the game. You get late fouls, free throws, quick possessions, and the odd desperate three that nobody really wants but everybody remembers when they check the box score. Those last 90 seconds can turn a solid scoring night into one that sneaks past the number, and with two offenses like this, you would rather be rooting for those extra points than sweating every miss. So, when you mix their offensive profiles, their season scoring patterns, and the way similar games at this venue have played out, the picture tilts toward a matchup that feels more like a track meet than a tug of war. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Northern Colorado versus Eastern Washington. Reese Court and Cheney sets up nicely for a tension game, the kind where every trip feels like it might swing your ticket. Northern Colorado comes in with an overall record around 18-10, solid in league play, and riding that kind of winning streak that gives a group a little swagger when they walk into someone else's gym. Eastern Washington, even with an overall mark closer to 11-17, has been much stronger in conference games, and they have quietly stacked their own run of wins, including that grind-style result where they held Portland State to the mid-50s on the road. The number on this game is small, basically the books asking you to pick which identity you actually trust. On one side, Northern Colorado plays like a seasoned offense, scoring in the low 80s on average, shooting right around 49% from the floor and mid-30s from deep, and they back it with reliable free throws when it gets tight. That kind of profile feels like a team that can travel because good shots and solid decisions look the same in any building, whether you are in Greeley or out in Cheney with the student section chirping at you. Eastern Washington is different, more of a run hot, run cold type of team. They score in the high 70s and shoot it well enough from the field and from three to scare anyone for stretches, but they also allow close to 80 a night, which turns a lot of their games into track meets that can tilt either way depending on who strings together stops. It is fun to watch, not always fun to rely on if you are holding a ticket. These two already felt each other out once in Greeley, and Northern Colorado came out of that one with a 74-71 win and the cover at home. That game showed a lot. It showed that Northern Colorado's more structured offense can find enough answers against this Eastern group, and it also showed that when things tighten late, the Bears can still manufacture buckets without losing their shape. Now you flip the venue, but you keep the same basic matchup, and the market still respects Northern Colorado enough to tag them as the side laying the tiny number rather than catching it. Honestly, that says a lot about where odds makers think the gap really is, because if this were dead even in their minds, you would see more hesitation about asking Northern Colorado supporters to pay any tax at all. Coaches love predictability this late in the season. Northern Colorado gives you that, with efficiency, decent shooting from everywhere, and a style that does not need a wild whistle or fluky shooting night to function. Eastern Washington leans more into chaos, and while that can break your way on some nights, it is a tougher thing to marry with a spread that asks you to be right about who controls the game in the last 4 minutes. Here's the thing, when you look at which side has more ways to stay within the number or stretch a one-possession lead into a margin that matters to bettors, the cleaner, more consistent offense usually wins that argument in February. As our first pick for this matchup, the Northern Colorado Bears to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Northern Colorado living in the low 80s, Eastern Washington hanging around the high 70s, and both carrying reputations for stretches where nobody seems interested in defending much. It is the kind of pairing that makes recreational bettors instinctively think this one is flying. But that is the highlight version of these teams, not always the real version you get in a late-season game where every possession is a small referendum on seeding. When they met in Greeley, they finished at a combined 145, comfortably shy of the kind of lofty expectation that is usually put on this type of big sky matchup. That was not an accident. That game showed that once these rosters see each other up close, the easy transition looks are not as easy, and both coaches are willing to slow things down a bit when the margin shrinks. Eastern Washington has also, quietly, tightened the screws on defense during their current winning streak. That Portland State game is a good example, holding the Vikings to just 55 points and barely over 31% shooting. Those are the type of numbers that signal a group taking more pride on that end. crashing the glass and forcing opponents into more uncomfortable shots. It is not that they suddenly became an elite defensive outfit, but the days of pure trading baskets every night start to fade once film piles up and coaches hammer some habits into the rotation. Northern Colorado, for their part, has started to look a bit more grown-up in how they close games. Instead of always leaning into pace, they show more patience late, working half-court sets, trusting their efficiency and their shooting percentages instead of rushing into the first semi-open attempt. That kind of approach chips away at the clock little by little. Every longer possession is one fewer total trip up and down for both teams, and over 40 minutes, that matters. There is also the rematch factor. Both coaching staffs have 40 minutes of fresh, direct film against this exact opponent from that first meeting. That usually leads to a cleaner plan on taking away easy threes, cutting off those quick-hit actions that worked the first time, and forcing both offenses to grind more in the half-court. When that happens, you still get good scoring runs, but you do not always get the sustained firepower needed to land on that very high total that people expect just from glancing at season averages. Honestly, these are still offenses that can light it up. No one is arguing that this suddenly morphs into a rock fight where both sides look broken. But to push a number that big across the finish line, you need a perfect blend of sustained pace, hot shooting from both squads, and a whistle that keeps rewarding free throws instead of empty trips. In a late February conference game with film, fatigue, and more deliberate game management all creeping in, that is a lot of boxes to check. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Wichita State versus Memphis. Memphis walks into this matchup as the home favorite, yet the way these two seasons have unfolded makes the road side feel like the one holding the steadier foundation. Public metrics and betting talk lean toward the Tigers, but the broader story of the year has had Wichita State looking more like the team that knows exactly what it is from night to night. The Tigers sit at 12-15-0 overall with a 7-7-0 mark in conference play, while the Shockers arrive at 18-10-0 and 10-5-0 in the league, which keeps them living near the top of the standings conversation instead of drifting around the middle. Across the full schedule, Wichita State has built roughly a 7-point scoring margin, putting up around 77.4 points per game and giving up about 70.3, and they usually walk away with a small but meaningful edge on the glass. Memphis, on the other hand, hovers right around even, scoring about 74.2 and allowing roughly 74.4, and they tend to sit close to level in rebounding, which quietly hints that many of their games turn into coin flips rather than controlled wins. Honestly, that contrast in nightly comfort level matters, because teams that win by a little more and rebound a little better often feel less fragile when close games get weird. Efficiency numbers tell a similar story. On sites like KenPom, Wichita State lands in the low 90s nationally with a healthy positive net rating in the high single digits, while Memphis sits a bit further back just outside the top 100 with a smaller positive net. That gap is not massive, but it is enough to say that the more complete, better graded profile so far has belonged to the visitors, which is not what you would expect if you only looked at who is favored at home. Recent form keeps nudging things in the same direction. The Shockers have grabbed 4 wins in their last 5 outings, including a double overtime road grinder at East Carolina and a comfortable road success by about 14 at Tulane, both of which show that they can travel, absorb punches, and still finish. Memphis has moved the other way over that same span, dropping 4 of 5, and every one of those losses has come by at least several possessions, with 3 swelling into full double-digit defeats that can wear on a group emotionally. Off the court, it has not exactly been tranquil for the Tigers. A senior guard was dismissed for repeated team rules violations, and another guard only recently returned to the rotation, and that kind of mid-season reshuffle near March can shake timing and chemistry even when the raw talent is still sitting there. Here is the thing, coaches can say it is all business as usual, but players feel those changes, and it often shows in the streaky, up and down runs you see in the results. On the stylistic side, Memphis prefers to ramp up the tempo, ranking high on national pace charts and trying to turn games into long court races where athleticism and pressure drive the story. Wichita State is far more comfortable in that mid-60s possession neighborhood, where each trip matters, half-court execution is emphasized, and rebounding discipline becomes a real weapon. When the stronger statistical and form profile, the cleaner recent results, the rebounding edge, and the steadier personality all sit on the side that is taking points instead of laying them, backing that underdog becomes the more natural position for bettors who care about the long game, not just the logo on the court. As our first pick for this matchup, the Wichita State Shockers to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Wichita State brings about 77.4 points scored per night and allows around 70.3, while Memphis comes in scoring roughly 74.2 and surrendering about 74.4, so both teams are very used to seeing respectable numbers on the board when things are done. That kind of baseline does not guarantee anything, but it does frame this as a clash between offenses and defenses that are familiar with mid-range totals, not bare-bones rock fights. Neither team truly fits the label of a pure grinded-out defensive squad. Memphis can look solid on that end in stretches, yet during its recent rough patch, it has allowed opponents to drop 76, 78, 87, and 99 points, which hints that once the initial pressure gets solved, clean looks and scoring runs start to appear a little too often. Wichita State has been stingier overall through the season, but even the Shockers have shown they can lean into a track-style script when necessary, as that wild 92-89 double overtime win at East Carolina clearly showed. The tempo profile adds another layer to this picture. Memphis lives on the faster side of national tempo rankings, eager to push, press, and create extra possessions, while Wichita State is tucked deep into the slower side of the chart in the mid-200s, where patience, sets, and structure usually rule. When a faster home team keeps pressing the gas and a confident opponent is willing to trade baskets instead of slowing things to a crawl, games often land in that gray area where the pace is not frantic but still a little quicker than the raw averages suggest. Recent box scores support the idea that both teams are comfortable in environments where the scoreboard is busy. Memphis has been involved in several games lately that finished with totals in the mid-140s, the low 150s, and even one that climbed into the 170s, which shows how quickly things can escalate when their style takes hold. Wichita State, in its last handful of outings, has bounced between more controlled affairs in the 120s and 130s and higher-scoring battles that pushed into the 150s or beyond, often when extra time or freer-flowing opponents pulled them into a looser rhythm. Honestly, that mix of outcomes is exactly what you get from teams that can defend well enough but are not allergic to offense and rhythm. Given how closely these two can play and how much is on the line in late February, there is a very real path to late-game fouling, extended offensive possessions, and even the possibility of extra minutes. And in that kind of script, you do not need perfection on every trip. You just need competence, tempo, and a game that never fully settles. Put together, the season-long scoring profiles, the tempo clash that can tilt upward, and the recent history of games that have no trouble finding points all lean toward a result that looks more like a higher-scoring contest than a defensive deadlock. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Hawaii versus UC Davis. Hawaii Rainbow Warriors at UC Davis Aggies on Thursday, February 26, 2026, sets up as one of those sneaky late tip games that bettors love to sweat while everyone else is winding down the night. You have a proud program flying in from the islands into a cozy California gym, different time zone, different routine, and yet still stepping into the role of favorite, which already tells you how much respect they have earned this season. Hawaii's body of work looks like a team that wins not just because shots fall, but because the basic, boring things are done better and done harder almost every night. Their record sits in that strong 19-7 range, while UC Davis sits in that respectable 16-11 window, and that gap feels bigger when you look at how those numbers were built, with Hawaii piling up double-digit average scoring margins and making opponents work for every clean look. It is not just scoreboard stuff either, it is the way they tilt the game, owning the glass, extending their own possessions, and squeezing second-chance opportunities away from their opponent, which quietly adds up over 40 minutes, even if you are just casually following the box score on your phone. UC Davis, for their part, brings an offense that can absolutely heat up, and their fan base knows that when the Aggies start hitting from outside, that building can feel small and loud in a hurry. They like to spread the floor, let the ball find their shooters, and lean on tempo and spacing to bother visiting defenses. The problem here is that Hawaii is built almost specifically to aggravate teams that live out there on the perimeter. They close out, they rotate, they stay attached, and they turn what is usually a comfortable rhythm into contested, late-clock jumpers that are a lot tougher to live on for a full game. That is where the Warrior rebounding advantage and physical style really becomes more than just a stat sheet line. When you win the boards and defend the three, you often win the hidden math, and Hawaii has made a habit of that, night after night. They turn misses into runouts, then settle into half-court offense that is patient, grown up, and more than willing to attack the paint, which in turn gets them to the free throw line again and again. Those trips to the stripe might not be glamorous, but for a favorite that needs to put distance on the scoreboard, they are pure gold, especially down the stretch when a home team is trying to claw back with quick threes instead of grinding stops. Recent meetings between these two have tilted quietly toward Hawaii, not in some blowout rivalry way, but in that steady, methodical manner where the Warriors' style wears on UC Davis over time. You see games where the Aggies hang around on energy and shot-making, yet in the last 8 to 10 minutes the more physical, more disciplined side edges ahead possession by possession. That pattern fits perfectly with what we have seen from Hawaii this season, with a rotation that may be missing a guard due to a longer-term injury but still leans on a solid, intact core, while UC Davis comes in generally healthy but still wrestling with that same matchup problem against size and defense. So when you stack up travel concerns, gym quirks, and all the small narrative angles people like to talk about, they feel real, but they still sit on top of a more important truth, that the team that defends harder, rebounds better, and gets easier points at the line usually has the cleaner path to taking care of the number in a spot like this. As our first pick for this matchup, the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. On paper, both offenses can put points on the board, and if you just scan season averages, this matchup almost begs you to expect a loose, free-flowing game where buckets come early and often. Honestly, that is where many tickets start, with the assumption that past raw scoring tells you everything you need to know about how this one will feel minute to minute. Here is the thing, though, Hawaii's defense is not just decent, it is designed to drag games into a slightly more uncomfortable place for opponents, especially those that rely on outside shooting. They force long possessions, they contest without completely losing control, and they push teams toward lower percentage shots inside the arc when the three-point line is choked off. UC Davis loves those perimeter looks. They like rhythm, space, and confident catch and shoot chances, and this particular opponent is very good at making sure those chances are fewer later in the clock and far more difficult. When a team that wants to play with pace and confidence in its shooting is suddenly forced into grinding possessions and tougher decisions, the final score tends to come down a notch from those raw averages that look so tempting on a spreadsheet. On top of that, Hawaii does not mind a game that breathes a little slower. They run when it is there, sure, but their comfort zone lives in half-court sets, strong cuts, post touches, and patient reads. That kind of style chews time, and it often trades quick pull-ups for deliberate trips to the rim that end with contact and free throws, which sounds like more scoring but actually eats into the total number of possessions over the full 40 minutes. Fouls and free throws can inflate points, but they also stop the clock, let defenses reset, and keep things from turning into a full-court track meet where both sides are getting easy transition looks over and over. If you think back to recent clashes between these programs, the story has not been wild. No defense chaos, but rather games where spurts of scoring are balanced by stretches of physical play and half-court grinding. Runs of points show up, as they always do in college hoops, yet the overall rhythm still feels more controlled than the raw offensive talent might suggest. That pattern pairs neatly with the way this particular Hawaii group prefers to manage a game, leaning on defense first, trusting that good shots will appear in due time, and forcing their opponent to be patient and precise just to stay comfortable on the scoreboard. So while the season numbers make a more explosive script very easy to imagine, the specific styles, the matchups on the perimeter, and the pace that Hawaii tends to impose point more toward a final combined number that lands shy of what many casual bettors might expect when they first glance at how these teams have scored all year. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. UC Irvine versus CSU Northridge. This matchup has that fun clash of personalities feel. UC Irvine trying to keep everything neat and tidy while CSU Northridge is perfectly happy to live in chaos and see what shakes loose. Both teams sit with very similar records, basically an 18-10 type profile, so on paper it looks tight, but the styles could not be more different. Irvine likes to keep things under control, organized half-court sets, good spacing, smart decision-making with the ball, and they take real pride in making opponents work for every decent look. They are the team that values every possession, uses the clock, and slowly leans on you until you start settling for jumpers you do not really want. Northridge, on the other side, leans into pace and pressure and embraces the idea that a messy game can actually be to their advantage. They score in the low 80s, give up a big number in return, and they are totally fine with that trade-off because it pulls teams into a style that is uncomfortable if you are used to more controlled basketball. They foul a fair amount, they put opponents on the line, they give you chances, but they also keep coming in waves, and that kind of constant pressure can wear on a team that prefers structure. Honestly, it can feel a bit like playing pickup against that group that never stops running and somehow always finds an open shooter in transition. Home court matters a bit more in a game like this, not just because of crowd noise, but because a home team that loves to run usually plays even faster when the building gets engaged. A big dunk, a corner three, a late whistle that goes their way, and suddenly the place is buzzing and the tempo creeps up a notch. Let me explain why that matters for the spread. When a game tilts toward more possessions and more emotional swings, it often favors the team that already thrives in that kind of storm, especially when that team is comfortable playing from ahead and from behind. Irvine can absolutely handle road environments. They are methodical enough to withstand runs, but they sometimes rely on rhythm and shot selection to stay in control. And that rhythm can get disrupted when the game turns into a track meet. There is also the subtle motivational edge. Northridge has worked its way from being more of an afterthought in the conference to a real problem, and a late-season showcase like this, at home, against a respected, disciplined opponent, is exactly the kind of spot where they want to send a message. Games like this are where a team that likes to run can come out with a bit of extra juice, press a little higher, attack the glass a little harder, and try to punch first instead of easing into things. So while Irvine's defensive discipline and structure travel well, this particular environment, with the pace, the energy, and the emotional stakes, quietly leans toward the side that is already most comfortable playing fast and feeding off the crowd. As our first pick for this matchup, the CSU Northridge Matadors to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Irvine's identity starts on defense. They hang their hat on making you work for every point, contesting shots, forcing you to play deep into the clock, and in a vacuum that usually points toward a more modest total. They are efficient enough on offense, but they do not need a shootout to feel comfortable. They are happy winning with solid execution and good shot quality. Northridge, though, plays like the scoreboard is barely a suggestion. They put up points, they give up points, and they stack possessions. The pace is quicker, the shot volume is higher, and the whistle tends to get involved because of how aggressively they attack off the dribble and on the glass. That style naturally drags totals upward, especially when opponents get to the line at a strong clip, and Irvine is disciplined but not immune to being put in rotation and forced into contact. Here is the thing, late-season conference games often get stretched out more than people expect. Coaches shorten rotations, key players stay on the floor longer, and when the game is tight, you get intentional fouls, extended reviews, and those long final 2 minutes that somehow take 15 real minutes. All of that feeds extra points, especially when both offenses are capable of hitting free throws and finding quick looks out of timeouts. Even a game that starts slow in the first 10 minutes can suddenly open up when fatigue hits and legs get a little heavier on defense than on offense. It would not be surprising to see this play out in 2 acts. Early on, Irvine tries to squeeze possessions, slow the pace, and test whether Northridge will stay patient against a more structured defense. As the game wears on, especially if the margin is tight, Northridge's style tends to make things looser, more transition opportunities, more scramble situations, and more whistles as players get aggressive trying to swing momentum. That kind of rhythm, with both teams capable of putting points on the board and one team especially comfortable living in high-scoring scripts, tilts the overall game shape toward a higher combined number rather than a grindy, low-scoring affair. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.